Hello everyone. In this movie, we're going to be changing the settings for properties via code. We're going to create, in the previous movie we did them via keyframe, and that is exactly what you're looking at on the screen, but now we're going to do similar changes via code. Now using the code makes it more dynamic for us because it allows us to control the changes via interactions with the screen or by data that we feed into the program. This gives us a lot more flexibility because we're not married to a preset set of keyframes that will always play the same thing no matter what. So for this, I'm going to create a new ActionScript 3 movie, and I am going to reuse the box that we had in the previous movie. So I'm going to go to the library for this new movie. As you see, my new movie is called Untitled 3, and I'm looking at that particular library, and there is nothing there. However, I still have my Untitled 2 movie open. So if I click on the drop down in the library, you'll notice that Untitled 2 is available, and that is where the movie that we just worked on in the previous movie is available for me. I can simply drag this into my stage in the new movie, and now it will appear in my library for Untitled 3. So with that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this movie clip right in the center, and I am going to its properties box. Notice that I have selected it, and now I am in the properties box for that particular movie clip. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to give it an instance name. I'm going to give it the instance name box, just because that's the only name that I could think of right now. We could call it whatever we want, but box is the name that we're giving it for now. So now what I want to do is I want to apply the different changes to the properties of this particular item via code. For writing code, I need to open up my actions window. You find that under Window, Actions, or you can press F9, which is the shortcut. Let me reduce the size of this window slightly so we can see a bit more of the screen. And what I'm going to do is remember that I named this box with lowercase b. So I'm going to apply a few sentences of code to it. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a listener so that it's always listening for a specific event. Since I want to be always listening, the event that I'm going to use is enter frame. So the code for this reads box dot add event listener, and then I am going to say this event is of type enter frame. Now this enter frame event is going to call a function that I'm going to call let's say move box, just because I want to reference it, but it could be called anything you want it to be called as long as you remember what name you're given to that function and what the use of that function is going to be. So let me define the function. Function move box, of which event is of type event. And now this function is going to do the actual mechanical work of what I want to do to that specific box. So for example, let's start with rotation. So I want to rotate the event target. So I'll say event target, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. Rotation plus equals, say, 5. Now this sentence, event target, this particular piece of it is referencing the box. Remember, the box is the listener. That is the target. That is what's listening. The box is listening. The listener is telling it if there's an event of type enter frame, which is what happens as soon as you start the movie, then do something, and this do something is the function. So box is the target of that event. Event target then is box. So we're basically saying box rotation plus equals 5. Rotation in code is measured in degrees. So 5 equals 5 degree rotation. Let's test this movie and see if it works. Now there's my movie rotating 5 degrees every frame. And as you notice, it goes on and I could by code accelerate it or decelerate it. So I have more dynamic access to it. Now, let's change the values for this for its alpha information. So now alpha is measured from 0 to 1, where 0 means complete transparency and 1 means 100% opaque. So how does that look? Let's say event dot target dot alpha equals 0.5. This is going to make my box 50% opaque, as you can see. Very good. So now let's go ahead and work on let's change this opacity so that it is dynamic. In order to do that, I would need to have a way of changing the value through time, and we did something similar in class where I created a variable of type number, and this variable changed through time as I kept on adding to it. So for that, I'm going to create a new variable at the top, and this variable is going to be I, just giving it the name I, of type number. Now remember, that name is whatever I want it to be. I could call it Carlos for all I care, but right now it's just a letter, it's easier to remember. So variable I of type number, number being the keyword that defines that this will be the type of data that goes into the variable, and I am going to give it a value of, let's say, 0.05. That's just a value. Remember, alpha information counts from 0 to 1, where 0 is completely transparent and 1 is completely opaque. So instead of saying event target alpha equals 5, now I am going to change this part of the equation, and I'm going to call it plus equals I. That should start my my changes by changing them by 0.05 into its value. Now when I play this, you should see the box to be 100% opacity, and that's because when we start on the stage, the box, it's at 100%. If I made this 0% opacity, then this would take over and it would increase it in value. But we're going to do that dynamically. What I want to create now, it's an if statement. This if statement is going to check what the value of my alpha is for the target, and if it's going to say if it's greater than 1, greater or equal to 1, then start reducing it in value. If it's less than 0, then start increasing it in value so that this thing is increasing and decreasing through time. Basically, the opacity makes the item appear and disappear through time. So how do we do that? Well, first we need to define that condition. The condition is if event target alpha, it's greater than or equal to 1, meaning 100%, then we need to start changing the value of I to a negative value so that when we add it to the alpha, it starts subtracting, just like we did in class. So it would say I times equals -1. Doing this changes whatever the value of I is to a negative value. Therefore, if I plus equal that negative value to alpha, in truth, in reality, I am subtracting it. Remember, plus equals is just adding whatever value happens to be here. And if that value is negative, then it's adding a negative value. So if I say 5 plus equals -2, what is the result of that? 3. In this case, then it's going to start subtracting the value of I, which happens to be 0.05. So if I play this, my box, whoops, sorry, I have an error. Now, for those of you who haven't had these errors or who have not actually seen how I read these errors, I look at the line of code that I've been given, and it tells me on line 9, column 27, there is a syntax error. So I say line 9, column 27. That's the first one. Let's take a look at line 9, column 27. So it starts counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It starts counting all the way until it finds what the problem is. And I think this is the problem. There's a space between the less than or equal to. Let's test that and see if it gives me what I needed. And as you can see, that little error right there, there was a space. There shouldn't have been space there because these two conditional checkers need to be together. Now, that is less than or equal to 1. And as you can see, when I test it, my box disappears through time. I'm going to extend that condition to say else if my event target alpha is less than or equal to 0, then I want to once again turn it from a negative to a positive. So I need to basically do the exact same operation. I times equals -1. And this would make the box appear and disappear from 1 to 0, 1 to 0, 1 to 0. So that is the line of code that allows me to do that. So far we have changed rotation and alpha information. Now let's say, for example, I want to change the scaling value through time. So the scaling property is called this way. Let me return here and say event target x scale, mind the syntax, x scale plus equals, target scale x. That is the syntax, scale x plus equals I. Why I? You might say, well, if you notice that I counts from 0 to 1, scaling values in code also measure from 0 to 1, where 0 is completely small, is the smallest it can be, and 1, it's 100% of the size. So 2 would be 200% of the size. However, I know that this I doesn't go beyond 1 because of the condition that I have created here. So as you can see, I am reusing this variable that I've created also to control a different property. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to scale both of these, both in the x and y axis, y in the not x and y, in the width and height. So plus equals I. This should scale at the same time that it disappears, according to what I'm looking at on this condition here. Let's take a look and test it. And as you can see, the box increases and decreases in size by the same value. Now, you don't have to use the same property. You can create a separate property that allows you to do this dynamically. Say, for example, you wanted this to be randomized. You wanted the value of the opacity to be a random size. You can simply change this whole equation here to math.random. Now math.random gives you a value between 0 and 1. Okay, so you could say math.random and that's it. Or you could multiply it by a value. Let's say we want this between 0 and 200% in size. So we can say this math.random times 2. So basically this equation here, this part of the equation is saying any number, math.random is going to give you any number between 0 and 1, and then you're going to multiply that by 2. So in essence, you're saying any number between 0 and 2. If math.random gives you a value between 0 and 1, and you multiply it times 2, then you're saying anything between 0 and 2 is going to be the value that I get. So let me go ahead and grab that particular sentence and add it to the y scale. And you'll see how awkward this is going to look. Now you might have expected the x and y to scale at the same time, at the same to basically be coordinated. Truth is, they're not, because both of them are randomized. As you can see from the equation, I am given a separate math.random value to its y scale. If you want the two things to be the exact same size, then all you have to do is replace this math, or not the same size, to scale proportionally. You would change that second part of the equation by the exact same size that you're given to the scale X. And now they are going to increase or decrease in size randomly between 0 and 200% by being the same, by maintaining the dimensions between X and Y. So that basically it's looking like a proper scale, as if you were pressing shift. Basically, you're constraining the proportions. So that is how you change scaling values. Now for position, we've been doing that in class. Position is fairly easy. You could just simply say event.target, and then you define what property you want to change, X or Y. So let's say in this case X plus equals a number, let's say 10, then this will automatically start moving my box to the right hand side. Now if you want to go ahead and create an if statement so that the box bounces to the front when it gets to the right hand side, then you can go ahead and do that the way we did with the box during class time. So hopefully these two videos have clarified the property changes that we can do either through code or through timeline changes. Where do you choose one or the other? Well, that depends on what you're trying to develop. Sometimes we have animations that we only know we're going to be playing once, or that if we play them, we'll always be playing the same way. So for that, there's creating the variables and changing all this code might be a little bit of an overkill. You might want to plan out those so that you create your animations in the timelines, and then use timeline keyframes for creating those animations, and then save those movies as movie clips that then you call on from the library whenever needed. But if you're truly looking for interactivity or changes over control over time, changes over time, then the best option, obviously, or the option, is going to be using the code. Hopefully this clarifies the concepts.